have to figure out how to do that. And that's why I'm mentioning it, so Katie can try to figure out how we can do that, if there's a way to do that. Because I'd love to share it on the screen. Somebody knows how to do it. Somebody has to do something. I will remember my hands. Good evening, folks. It's my studio producer telling me to be careful about moving my hands around because they get really close to the camera. Good evening, everybody. I'm Derrick Pitts, Chief Astronomer at the Franklin Institute Science Museum, your cool astronomer, welcoming you to the March edition of Night Skies at Home. Night Skies at Home is the Franklin Institute's at-home astronomy program. This program was meant to carry us over during the pandemic period from 2020 until when we finally got all this resolved, as a reminder of a program that we have been doing at the Franklin Institute Live called Night Skies at the Observatory. Night Skies at the Observatory is a public program in which we invite you to come down to the museum at night and join us upstairs on our 4th floor observatory on our rooftop observing deck, where we have all sorts of activities, astronomy related activities that you can partake of while you're enjoying views of the night sky through the telescopes on our 4th floor observatory and through the additional telescopes we add on the 5th floor roof deck. It really is a great evening. We do all these great things with planetarium programs, live activities, observing in the observatory and up on the roof deck. And we talk about all things related to astronomy and space exploration. And it's just a fun time to do. We do this program once a month at Franklin. And we had suspended it during the pandemic period. So now that that's getting by us, hopefully we'll look forward to a time not too long from now when we'll get back to doing the program live at the Franklin Institute. In the meantime, this program, Night Skies at Home, is meant to connect you with the night skies at home. You know, you can see a tremendous amount of the night sky. You can see a lot of really cool astronomical phenomenon from wherever you live. It doesn't matter if you live in an urban area or if you live out in the country someplace where the sky is much darker. There's plenty for you to be able to see without any difficulty at all. So you might be thinking that in order to connect with the night sky, you need to go someplace where the sky is clear and dark. And maybe that hampers you from actually doing that because you feel like you can't see very much in a center city environment. Well, the truth of the matter is the extra light that we have in our center city skies actually acts as a filter. And what it does is it takes out all of what I sometimes refer to as the background noise. That background noise being the hundreds or thousands of stars that you might be able to see under a clear, dark sky far from city lights. And what we're left with are only the brightest objects available in the sky. That means we're looking at the moon. We're seeing all of the bright planets of the solar system, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and we're seeing all of the bright stars of the sky and their bright star patterns that make up the main stars of constellations that we might know so well. For example, the Big Dipper is one that everyone knows really well, and that's easily seen under an urban sky. And those planets I mentioned, you don't even need binoculars or a telescope to see those. And of course, everybody can see the moon. If we add to that some artificial satellites, my favorite, of course, being International Space Station, now you have a tremendous amount of objects that you can see even under center city sky conditions. Now, if you live in an urban area, that's what we have, and that's a great way to get started with astronomy because those are the basics you need to get started with looking at the night sky. But then when you do move to a place where the sky is clearer and much darker, you'll already be set up with those familiar markers that you can use to find your way around the rest of the sky, that you might be able to see someplace where the sky is clear and dark. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to provide the information you need to know for a spring sky. Yes, a spring sky. Now that it's March 3rd, we're just about 16 days away, 17 days away from the first day of spring. So those winter constellations we've spoken of over the last 2 to 3 months, they're now sliding across to the west across the sky, and coming into positions of prominence are the bright constellations of the springtime sky. So we'll talk about those tonight. There are also a number of planets that are available for us to see, not in the evening sky, but in the morning sky. But a really great view and a great collection of planets all together making a really interesting formation, if you will, in the morning sky. And it'd be a good excuse for you to get up a little bit earlier and take a look at a beautiful sky in the morning just before sunrise. We'll also talk a little bit about International Space Station. We'll talk a little bit tonight about James Webb Space Telescope. Remember James Webb Space Telescope from a month ago? Yeah, well, it's out there. We'll talk about that just a little bit. We'll also talk about a new Franklin Institute program I spoke about last month, a practical guide to the cosmos. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm, of course, starring in the program along with my partner in that, Kalpana Pot, a TikTok influencer that you may have found on Instagram. We'll talk about that a little bit. Again, we'll talk about what's happening in the sky in terms of planets and constellations that are available at this time of this year. And of course, we want your questions. We want your questions. Please send your questions to us. Use the chat box to let us know what the questions are. And guess what? We have a really special guest joining us tonight. You ready for this? This is an engineer and a rocket scientist. Yes, a real live rocket scientist. Brandon Burroughs is joining us tonight to talk about rocket propulsion, and in particular, we're going to talk about the future of rocket propulsion. You know, it takes a long time to get from Earth to Mars using the current propulsion systems that we have, but it's possible that we might be able to shorten those trips if we use a different kind of propulsion system. And this rocket scientist, Brandon, who has been working with NASA on the current and newest rockets that are about to take trips into space, Brandon knows all about this, and he's going to help us learn more about these new technologies that we could see in the not too distant future that might help shrink the solar system, if you will. And, you know, the other thing we're going to do once we have this real live rocket scientist on board is we're going to ask him if he has the t-shirt. You're saying, what t-shirt? You know, the t-shirt that says, yes, I'm a real rocket scientist. We're going to ask him if he has the t-shirt. So we have a lot of great stuff coming up for you this evening, folks, and we hope you'll enjoy it. Again, let us know where you're watching this program. Where are you enjoying this program tonight? And don't forget to let us know about your questions. We have folks listening from Delaware, from New Jersey, from Bensalem, and from Burlington Township, New Jersey. Thanks a lot for joining us. Glad you could be with us. Anybody else listening in? Let us know where you're listening to this program. We'd love to find out where you are. Guess what? You know, where you are, the stars where you are probably the same as the stars here. We might have to adjust some times a little bit, but unless you live very far north, like up in northern Canada, or if you live very far south, like maybe you're in Florida or even farther south than that, we've had folks call in from there before. The skies will be pretty much the same if you're right around here where we are at this latitude. So that means if you're in Beijing, China, the stars for you tonight, when it becomes night for you, are going to be the same stars as they are for us right now. If you're over in Spain, the stars that you saw last night are going to be the same stars that we are seeing tonight. And as we go around the planet in that band, all the stars are going to be the same for those people who live in that band. The changes are just if you're further north or further south. We'll talk about how the sky is laid out and how you can use that layout to help you orient yourself towards how to view the night sky in a way that makes sense for you. Okay, so again, thanks for joining us. This is Night Skies at Home, the March edition. All right, so let's jump into a little bit of sky phenomenon just to get you oriented toward where things are in terms of how this planet is making its path around the sun so far this year. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. Right now, sunrise is coming at 6:29 a.m. 6:29 a.m. for those of us that live at this latitude north. Sunset is coming at 5:55 p.m. So guess what? That means that we're gaining more minutes of sunrise on the morning side. The sun is rising earlier and earlier. And since sunsets are now coming at 5:55 p.m., that means sunset is coming later, so we're adding more minutes of sunlight onto the end of the day. So right now, our days are giving us 11 hours, 26 minutes of sunlight. That's great. You know what that means? That means we're going to have additional heating, and as the planet has additional heating, we're going to find that we're having warmer temperatures. And of course, that's bringing us right on to spring. Guess what? The vernal equinox is on March 20th this year. March 20th at 11:33 in the morning. And so on that date, I really love this little fact about this. You know, we usually say that spring will arrive on that date. Well, guess what? Astronomically speaking, it's really the other way around. It is that the Earth arrives at a particular point in its orbit around the sun, a point that we refer to as the vernal equinox, the first day of spring. It all has to do with the Earth's rotational axis and the orientation of that rotational axis. You know, the Earth's axis is tilted 23.5 degrees away from vertical. So the Earth's rotational axis is not like this, but tilted like this. Well, that 23.5 degree tilt allows us to have seasons during the course of the year. Well, there are extremes to that. And one of the extremes, of course, is December 21st. And that's when the axis is tilted its greatest distance away from the sun. That means we have fewer hours of daylight during that portion of the year. And that means we have cooler temperatures. On June 21st, that axis is tilted towards the sun. And because of that, we have more hours of sunlight. I've exaggerated the tilt here, of course. But halfway in between, March 20th, September 20th, that axis is nearly vertical. And because of that, we have equal hours of daylight and darkness. Hence the term equinox, folks. Equinox, the vernal equinox, equal nights, equal hours of daylight and darkness. It's at that point, the Earth reaches that point in its orbit around the sun, that we begin to see those changes that we love to see coming. The warmer temperatures, the budding flowers, the greening of the trees, all that sort of stuff that tells us we're on the way to summer. We're almost there, just another few days, just another couple of weeks, and we'll be there when the Earth arrives at that point we call the vernal equinox. Cool, great. Okay, so that's where we're headed. We'll be there pretty soon. So the moon today is just 2 days old. That means it started its most recent cycle of phases just 2 days ago. So it has another, 27 days to go before we come around to the end of the cycle. But in the meantime, what's going to happen is we'll have the next full moon is coming up on the 18th of this month. And just 5 days from now, we'll be at first quarter. So let's see, today is March the 3rd. 5 days from now will be March the 8th. March the 8th will be our first quarter moon. Now, this is the perfect time for anybody to get out and enjoy looking at the moon. And the reason why is because as the moon is growing in its phase and the amount of the moon that you can see in the sky, well, the moon isn't as bright as it will be when we get to full moon about 2 weeks from now. Now, you might think that full moon is a perfect time to look at the moon, but there's some complications with that. It's nice and bright, yes, but the problem is, since the moon is receiving full sunlight right down onto the surface of the moon directly from the sun, this means that there aren't any shadows. Very few shadows are created when the sunlight hits the surface of the moon like this. When the moon is at first quarter, and the moon and the sun are 90 degrees away from each other at that 90-degree angle, this means that rays of light striking across the surface of the moon, striking crater rims and mountains and things like that, create shadows. And those shadows allow you to see the moon in sort of like 3D. So the shadows provide relief. So as you're looking at the surface of the moon, you can see the difference between deep craters and tall mountains, especially if you're observing with something as simple as a pair of binoculars. So I encourage you over the next 5 days or so, right up to first quarter, a little past first quarter, to observe the moon with a pair of binoculars and see what you can see on the surface of the moon. It is spectacular. And hey, guess what? Did you receive a telescope as a holiday gift this past holiday? Well, guess what? The moon is a perfect target for you to test out that telescope. And you got to believe me, you'll be amazed at what you can see on the surface of the moon. You know, if you have just enough magnification power in your telescope, you can actually see the astronaut's footprints on the surface of the moon. No, you can't. You can't see that. Nobody can see that kind of stuff. Forget that. I'm just kidding with you. You can see a lot of really cool stuff, but all of the stuff that's on the surface of the moon, left over from when the astronauts went there 50 years ago, the moon is so far away, or far enough away, I should say. And those objects actually are so small that we cannot resolve them or images of those objects on the surface of the moon. You need to be really, 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 really close to the moon. Say like with an orbiting satellite around the moon that will have us close enough to be able to pick out those spots on the surface of the moon. So you can look at the locations where the astronauts landed, but you really won't see very much detail at all. You won't see any detail of their forays around on the surface of the moon. But the moon is fun to look at anyway. Everybody loves to look at the moon. So you take a look at the moon with your telescope or your binoculars and you'll see what's there. There are great planets visible this month: Venus, Venus, Saturn, Mars, Mercury, and all of them together with the moon. In a little while, I'll talk to you about when to look, where to look, how to see them, all those sorts of things. And we still have great constellations. The winter constellations are moving over toward the western side of the sky, while the spring constellations are coming up from the east, taking a keystone position in the sky. And we'll talk about that with some star maps in a little bit greater detail later on in the program. We'll use some star maps to help us see that stuff. But folks, I come to this great portion. Let me do one thing first. I'm forgetting my order of things. Let me check two things. Let me see if we have any questions. Don't forget, we want your questions. And before we go talk to our engineer friend, we're going to see if you have any questions and see who else is joining the program. So we have quite a few questions. My studio producer here, the lovely Linda, says we have questions. What do we have, Linda?
Okay, Mike wants to know, what unique stellar event do you think we will see in our lifetime, and what unique stellar event would you like to see in your lifetime?
Mike is wondering what unique stellar event I would love to see in my lifetime and what unique stellar event might happen that would be worth watching. There's a couple of things I would want to see, Mike. I've seen several very bright comets, and I really hope we have an opportunity in the next 40 or 50 years to see another really bright comet. It's a stunning view. And I know that a lot of people on the planet haven't seen that because it's been a while since we saw the last really bright comet. So that would be a really cool one. Another one I think would be really, really fun, Mike, would be a supernova. I think it would be pretty cool to see a star explode. But I have to add one little caveat, Mike. I don't want that star to be very close to us. I want it to be a good distance away, and I want to have a little bit of warning about when it's going to happen. So I think a lot of people might like to see a supernova, but let's not have that happen too close to us. We don't want to be part of in the blast zone of that in any way, shape, or form. So I think those are the cool things I'd like to see. Thanks for that question, Mike. What else do we have?
Bob says it's great to watch a fellow Laurentian talk about one of his favorite passions. So hello from the Rochester, New York Astronomy Club.
Hey, Bob from the Rochester, New York Astronomy Club, a fellow Laurentian from St. Lawrence University. We're Larrys. Very good. We're called Saints now, Bob, but you know how it goes. But thanks for joining our program tonight. And, let me send you my fondest greetings to the Rittenhouse Area Astronomy Club. I am great friends with the astronomy clubs here in the Delaware Valley. We work hand in hand doing a lot of programming, and I know you guys can have great skies up there, and it's great to hear you. Thanks a lot for joining us, Bob. And, we got to go see St. Lawrence sometime. Maybe you ought to think about coming to class reunion later this year, Bob, in June. Check it out. Go to the website and see what's up. Folks, that was some Larry to Larry talks from St. Lawrence University alumni. Hey, thanks, Bob. See you later. What's up next?
William would like to know, are there binary black holes, and do they eventually become one large black hole as they get closer?
William would like to know, is there any such thing as a binary black hole, and do they eventually coalesce as they get closer? Wow, that's a great question. And guess what, William? Yeah, we think this kind of thing has happened in the history of the universe. We've only seen one instance. We've only been able to detect one instance of this. And you got to understand the complications around this. First of all, we can't see black holes. We don't know where they all are. We can only sort of get an idea of where black holes based on how they affect other things. But this idea of them colliding and then coalescing into another one, we believe that that has happened. And we could tell using a device that actually detects gravitational waves. And we got a signal through a brand new instrument. It's a gravitational wave detector that detected an event that seemed to show the signature of the collision of two black holes that happened billions and billions and billions of years ago. And we're only just now getting the signal. But that's the only instance in which we've actually been able to observe something we think might be that event. So we don't know when it's going to happen. We can't tell where there are other binary black holes. So it's difficult for us to say, but theoretically, this is something that can happen. So astronomers are on the lookout for this. This is part of the reason why this kind of detector was built, so that we might be able to detect really dynamic events like that. So we'll just have to wait and see if more events like that happen. Wouldn't that be a fun thing to see? Two black holes colliding and coalescing? That'd be fun. I wouldn't want to be too close to that either, though. Yep, what else?
Liz would like to know, do you have any thoughts about the space junk that will hit the moon?
Oh, Liz, thanks a lot for that. Liz is wondering if I have any comments about the space junk that will hit the moon. Here's my most first of all, for those of you that don't know what's happening, tomorrow morning, 7:25 a.m., what is thought to be a spent rocket booster is going to collide onto the back side of the moon, the far side of the moon, near the crater Hertzsprung. Okay, now, since it's on the far side of the moon, we won't be able to see this. But subsequent to that, we have some orbiting spacecraft around the moon that are going to try and get a look at the location where the impact is supposed to occur. So here's the most interesting thing about this for me, Liz. Guess what? Nobody wants to own up to this booster. We're not 100% sure whose booster it is. Some have speculated that it's a SpaceX booster. Some have speculated that it's a Chinese booster from the Chang'e 5T1 mission. But no one will own up to owning this, and we're not really sure who put this booster into orbit. So tomorrow morning, 7:25, if you feel a little shudder, you won't feel anything. But that's when it's going to collide onto the backside of the moon. And that's what I think is most interesting, is that we're not sure who owns it, and nobody will fess up to owning it. So that's actually a bit of an issue, because we do have quite a bit of concern about the amount of space junk in orbit around this planet, and we need to be making some plans about how to deorbit some of the stuff that we put up there that are spent rocket boosters and dead satellites and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to have to figure that one out, how to identify who owns what for sure. So thanks for that question. That's a good one, Liz. We have one more?
One more.
One more.
And this one is from 9-year-old Angela.
Aha.
What is your favorite planet?
9-year-old Angela. Hi, Angela. Thanks for joining us tonight. And you're wondering, what's my favorite planet? Well, it's really hard to choose, Angela, because they're all so interesting. But if you had to ask which one is my favorite planet, I'm going to have to say it's a toss-up, really. I think Saturn just looks gorgeous in a telescope. It really does. And it embodies all of that cool stuff you think of when you think about astronomical stuff. It's got the cloud bands, it's got the rings, it's got all that really great looking stuff, and it just looks fabulous in a telescope. Now, second, of course, might be Jupiter. That's probably my second favorite planet, mostly because of how dynamic its atmosphere is. And that looks really cool in a telescope too. But then Mars comes into the picture. And why Mars? Because Mars is so much like Earth. At some point in its history, Mars was much more Earth-like. I mean, like with water and atmosphere and stuff. And you know what? I wouldn't mind going to Mars just to see what it's like. And it's the only planet in the solar system that we're actually going to be able to set foot on other than the moon and kind of walk around. So that's my order. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. Write back and tell us which one you like. All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for the great questions. And if you're watching our program from someplace, please let us know. Send us a little note and let us know where you're watching from. Okay, folks, the highlight of tonight's program. In the years that I've been doing this program and a lot of programs at the Franklin Institute, I've had a lot of really great guests, and it ranges everywhere from physicists to artists to musicians to astronauts, just all across the board. But you know what? For the very first time tonight, I have a really, really special guest. Our special guest tonight comes originally from Birmingham, Alabama. He studied engineering at Tuskegee University. He was an engineering co-op for General Electric Aviation. And since fourth grade, he has always wanted to be a rocket scientist. Since fourth grade, he's always wanted to be a rocket scientist. Well, when he was doing a co-op at GE Aviation, he could have stayed there as an employee, but you know what? He said there wasn't enough space in it for him. So he went to work for Boeing, where he's worked as an SLS, that's the Space Launch System, NASA's latest, newest rocket. He's worked as a loads and dynamics analyst on that rocket for NASA. Let me show you a picture of his office. If you'll hang on for just a second, I'm going to see if I can possibly do this for you. Just a moment. I'm going to see if I can show you a picture of his office. Give me a chance to just clean up my screen here a little bit, and hopefully I can locate this picture of his office. Let me get some of this other junk out of the way. And let me say, oh yes, here's his office right here. I'm going to enlarge this picture, get this stuff out of the way. Yeah, how about that? Isn't that a great picture? So you're looking at a work bay here where you can see the SLS rocket lying on its side, and the four black things you see in the background, those are the exhaust nozzles of the rocket motors right there. And you can see how big it is if you look at the people who are on the floor there. Well, this is the office. This is the office of this rocket scientist that's going to join us right now. He's a recipient of NASA's Space Flight Awareness Trailblazer Award in 2020, and he's currently finishing his master's degree at Florida Institute of Technology. Folks, please join me with a warm welcome for this rocket scientist, Brandon Burroughs. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Derrick, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight. This is really unique. I've never had a rocket scientist on this program before. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for having me.
Hey, Brandon, you know, your office there is really spectacular. That picture that shows the SLS rocket lying on its side with the four rocket, the exhaust nozzles right there. And it's so big. You can see the size from the people working on the floor. So tell us a little bit about that office there where you were working.
Yeah, so I originally, well, I actually work in Kennedy Space Center, which is where I've worked the past 5 years as an engineer. But that picture is actually a picture of what we call the Rocket Factory in Michoud, NASA Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans. And I spent a lot of time out there, about a little over a year's worth of time out there in Michoud, actually working on that very article that you have a picture of. Spent a lot of nights crawling through that thing. Actually, I remember when it was broken up into a bunch of other segments. That's showing the core stage of the vehicle and its final integration. But all of it wasn't that big at one point. All of those different components were at one point, disassembled from the vehicle. So the engines, the part that the engine connects to is the engine section, which is what I was very heavily involved with integrating and stuff like that. So yeah, it breaks down to a bunch of smaller pieces. And while I was out there, I focused on basically before the engine section. Again, that's the area that connects to the engine. Before that area was where it is now. It basically was totally empty. It was just a shell when I arrived. And I was one of the engineers who was instructed to work right there with our technicians and fill it up with all of the plumbing and all of the electrical stuff and everything that allowed it to actually integrate with those four RS-25 engines and be what it is now. So yeah, it was great.
Wow. So you're one of the engineers who helped put all this stuff together to make this enormous rocket.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it is definitely a big team of us. It's definitely not one person. It takes a lot of smart people to put anything this large together. But again, as the frontline engineer, it's your job to basically work directly with the technicians who are actually touching the vehicle. Because fun fact is, engineers 9 times out of 10 don't actually get to install any of the actual hardware. It's the technicians, the aerospace technicians, who actually do that. We're just there to help advise and make sure that everything is going in the right place. And if something does go wrong, we're the people who elevate that to other people who can fix those problems. So that was my job as the frontline engineer. But you definitely have to understand every little nuance there that's going on in that very complex area. So it was really, really cool.
It's really mind-boggling, Brandon. That's really incredible. So this particular rocket, the SLS, this is the next generation of launch vehicles that NASA's working on building that are going to be part of the our next ventures out into space. Tell us a little bit about how SLS fits into that program.
Yeah, definitely. So if you haven't heard, NASA has a new program by the name of the Artemis program, which is very similar to the legacy program, the Apollo program, where we're going back to the moon this time. So that's pretty awesome to be a part of. It's definitely it's something I've watched, old videos of the Apollo missions and things like that, and it's awesome to now say, man, I'm going to be able to be a part of the next generation of that. So the core stage of the SLS that you saw there is one of the major components to the Space Launch System rocket. There's also rocket boosters that are attached to it. There's also the Orion capsule, which will hold the actual astronauts and things like that. And all of those components are actually stacked in the vehicle assembly building in Kennedy Space Center, getting ready to be launched here very soon. And I also had the privilege of working that as well. So I worked the stacking of all those components at Kennedy Space Center as well, once that component left the test stand at Stennis Space Center. So yeah, man, it's just super awesome to be a part of this next generation of vehicles, and definitely the vehicle that's going to send the next man, the first woman, and the first person of color to the surface of the moon.
Wow, that sounds great. So you're right there at the future of space exploration.
Oh yeah, right there. And actually, a lot of people ask me since I work out here, how does it feel to have rockets, launching around you and stuff like that? And it's super awesome. I try my best to make every single launch. There's actually one today. Again, you're working and you may just hear a nice rumble at your computer, and you look out your window and boom, there it is. There's a rocket going up. So working in Kennedy is super awesome, and it's definitely building and growing. And there's a lot of industry that are moving down here to again pave that way for the next generation of space travel.
That sounds great. Hey, Brandon, I just got to say one thing. First of all, you're really killing me. You're really killing me when you say that you watched old videos of the Apollo program. You're really hurting me here, man. So let's try to not use the word old when we talk about the Apollo program. I grew up on that. But yeah, you're right. That's like old technology, of course. But here's a question I have for you. I mean, you're doing what I think a lot of people would identify as a dream job. And when we were talking earlier, I said to you, you are what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, you're right there, hands-on, working with the rockets that are going to push us on to our next adventures in space. But you've been planning this for a very long time. I gave a little bit of it away in your introduction, but go back and give people a little bit of description of your journey to get where you are now.
Yeah, so like you said earlier, I'm born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. There are no rockets launching around there, but the power of media, right? I've always been able to see, like, on the news, like the space shuttle launch, or for me, a big thing was popular science magazines. I convinced my parents to give me a subscription, and I used to see all the like future aspirations we had for space travel inside of those magazines and stuff. And I think that just led to me thinking to myself as I look up at the stars, like, man, I want to be a part of that, but how can I be a part of that? And I think I really wanted to go and reach out and touch those heavenly bodies. And that's what convinced me to be an engineer, because I'm not going to be able to walk there. I'm going to have to be in some type of spacecraft. So I was like, all right, cool. Spacecraft development is what I want to do. So once I made that decision, decided I wanted to be an engineer, I worked really hard in school in the math and sciences, and I received a full academic scholarship to Tuskegee University, which is a very, very good engineering school. And I went there, and after I graduated from there, I started working with the Boeing company as a systems engineer on the Space Launch System program. So, and even to go back a little bit further than that, I mean, like you said, fourth grade was really when I decided that I wanted to go to Tuskegee and be an engineer. So all that happened pretty early on, and I just stayed on course, and I'm still on course now. So, yep, that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Oh, one more thing too. There was also a really big moment on my way during that journey where I was just like, well, why would I do this? I know, like, I started thinking to myself, there's so many people that are hungry in the world and stuff, and why would we spend so much money on this type of stuff? And one of the things that resonated with me was knowing that I want to save the world one day, and one of the best ways to save the world is for everybody to realize that we're all the same. And I think you get that feeling, number one, when you go to space and you look at the Earth and you see the Earth in its most natural habitat. There's no borders like in the maps that we see. Everything is just there and everything's one. And that's when we all realize that we're human, and that's what's important. And I think in the world today, that's a very, very important message that we need to have for us to come together and really work hard to love on each other and take care of each other. So that's one of the biggest things that pushes me every day to continue to go out into space.
And that's a really great message, Brandon. I'm so glad you said that. You know, all the time, people question, why are we spending money on a space program when it really doesn't, or it seems as if it doesn't help people directly on the planet. And there's so many ways in which it does, but that one in particular is probably the, one of the most important parts of that, or one of the most important messages that people can try to absorb from, the work that we do to explore space and to explore this planet. And, it has been said by a number of astronauts that they wish they could get all of the world's leaders up into space so that they could look back on Earth and understand exactly as you said, that this is one planet, we are one people on this planet, and this is the place where we all have to live and get along. So that's a really great and important message. Thank you very much for talking about that. So I think also the other piece, Brandon, is that I think you've really said something to the folks that are listening to this program tonight, especially the kids that are listening to this program tonight, that if they're interested in pursuing a career in space, hey, look, set your mind to it and head out and go do it. And you've done exactly that. And you've gotten to right where you want to be. So that's really great. Congratulations.
Yeah, and definitely one of the cool things about what I do now. So I spent my first 5 years as an engineer, but now I'm working on the like concept development side of things. So I've moved on from engineering, and now I'm using that engineering and that technical background to help develop future concepts for advanced propulsion systems or advanced anything. And I think that's super cool. And that speaks to the fact that engineering was a great way for me to get started and get into the industry. But now I'm getting I have the luxury of, hey, what should be the next big thing? And the way I like to break it down is, in the middle of the night, you may have an epiphany and you pull out a piece of paper, or you may be at dinner, you pull out a napkin and you draw out a concept that you can think of. And your goal inside these advanced concept development roles is to take that concept that's on that napkin and make it into something that is actually a real product that you can touch and launch one day. So that's my goal now, is to take these ideas and to make them into real products one day. And every spacecraft we've ever known, it started like that. It started as just a sketch, and now it became something bigger. So that's what I'm doing now, as of a few months ago. So again, yeah.
Well, do me a favor, Brandon. Would you, when you draw up the next design on one of those napkins, would you please sign it and date it to me? I would really love that. I know I've seen some pretty cool things come out of some envelope drawings in my time too. But you know what? Let's talk about that. Let's go in that direction, because you've had this really great opportunity and this privilege to, because of the hard work that you did and the training that you've had, the experience that you've had, to work on this latest generation of rocket propulsion. And, I think everybody's familiar with the kind of rocket propulsion that we have right now, this chemical propulsion system in which you take a fuel and you take an oxidizer and you mix this stuff together, light a match to it, and use the thrust that's generated from the energy bound up in the fuel to lift these masses into space, lift the rockets and lift the astronauts into space. And that's how we've done all the space exploration we've done. But, we're talking about a new era in space exploration where it's not just going to low Earth orbit, and it's not just going to the moon, but we have these dreams about going out to Mars. And one of the challenges about going to further locations in the solar system is it takes a long time to get there. And so, I've read a little bit about how engineers are beginning to think about different kinds of propulsion systems that might be able to make the trip shorter. And you've done some work in that direction too. Can you tell us some about what that future of rocket propulsion might be looking like?
Yeah, no, I think so. When I talk about these types of things, I love the level set, kind of help people understand some of the issues with going deeper into space, and why that's sometimes a lot harder than, not that the moon isn't challenging. It's very challenging to go to the moon, but there's added complexity when you do go into deep space. But for instance, the Saturn V rocket is like 360 feet tall, and on the last, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 feet are where the payload is. So you got another 340 feet, and people are like, what is that? Well, most of that's fuel. That you use that fuel and those oxidizers to, create a chemical reaction and create thrust that launch you out of Earth's orbit. And once you go fast enough, you basically detach yourself from those fuel tanks, and that little bitty module on the top is what coasts the rest of the way to the moon or wherever you're going. And that's a lot. And that after a while doesn't become as efficient. It's kind of like imagine having a car to where your car is mostly fuel. Most of us ride around in cars that the fuel tank is not the majority of the actual car. It's just a smaller portion. And the reason why we have that is because of the infrastructure that we have. We have gas stations along the way. So if you're going from Florida and you're going to California, your tank doesn't have to be that big, because you can stop on the way there and fill up, and however many times you need to get there. Well, we don't have those in space, and therefore you basically have to bring everything with you, including your fuel. So yeah, if your car was going from Florida to California and there was no infrastructure, it would start looking like a rocket, because you have to take all your fuel with you. So that's one of the things I like to explain of why those payload loads are so small, and kind of explain the rocket equation in a nutshell. Now, kind of to go to the second part of your question, what's wrong with chemical rockets? Well, like I said, you just kind of point and you shoot and you just coast the rest of the way there. And that's okay, but there's a few problems with your mission architecture with that. So if I point and I shoot and you coast the rest of the way, what if something goes wrong on the way there? You can't just turn around, because you're dependent on yourself to just coast the rest of the way there. But there are other propulsion methods that open up that abort window, to where, hey, I can turn around and we can go back to wherever we need to go back because something has happened. One of those forms of propulsion is nuclear propulsion systems, space nuclear propulsion systems. And that's pretty cool because, like you mentioned before, with chemical rockets, you have an oxidizer and a fuel. And again, that adds weight and mass and things like that. But with nuclear, like let's say nuclear thermal propulsion, you only have just a fuel. You don't have an oxidizer. And what you're doing is you have a fuel like hydrogen, and you have a nuclear reactor that gets really hot. And you basically run that hydrogen, you flow that hydrogen over that really hot reactor core, and it heats up that hydrogen, and that is what creates thrust and goes out the back of your nozzle. So you don't have a oxidizer and a fuel, you just have just the fuel. That's a cool system, but also what's cool about that is nuclear propulsion just gives you a higher specific impulse, which I think the easiest way to explain that is just a more efficient engine. So you have a more efficient engine that can allow you to get to a destination faster. So using a chemical rocket to get to Mars might take you 6 to 8 months. Using a nuclear thermal propulsion system, we're looking at maybe 3 to 4 months.
Brandon, does that also mean if I'm using a nuclear propulsion rocket that I can have more payload because I don't have to carry as much fuel?
Yeah. So like I said before, it really adds flexibility to your mission architecture, because like you're saying right now, if it takes me a very long time, if it takes me 8 months to get to Mars, I now have to bring 8 months worth of food for your humans that are on the way. But if it takes me 4 months, I can now keep that same vehicle, but that storage area that would be holding additional 4 months worth of food, I can now make that living space and make my astronauts more comfortable and things like that. So it gives you a lot more options when you can get to a place faster, which is why a lot of the industry, a lot of different agencies were looking into these different advanced propulsion systems, because they're going to be key to going deeper into space.
That sounds really cool. That would be a great step forward. So I would imagine that there are that there are folks working on developing these kinds of propulsion systems now for possible use in the future.
Yeah, no, there definitely are. I think that, and you can look up, NASA has definitely made a big effort in the past few years of just saying, hey, this is technology we really want to look into, because we're getting very serious about the next step. We're focused on going to the moon, but we're going to the moon to train and try things out. We really want to go to Mars after that. So again, we have to start looking at these different propulsion systems now. We can't wait till we get done training on the moon and say, hey, we're ready to go. We have to start looking at those things now. And whether we use that, these advanced propulsion systems for Mars, I don't make those decisions. But once you go past Mars and you go to other planets, it's almost a no-brainer. You're going to need some type of advanced propulsion system, because, yeah, again, we might be able to make 6 to 8 months work. You're going to the moons of Jupiter, 6 years to get there. I don't know. That's 6 years in one direction, and we like to bring our crew back, so that's a 12-year trip. So we think that'll be very, very difficult. Not only from a technological standpoint, but from a physiological standpoint. We're not sure what will happen to the astronauts from a physiological standpoint. I think the longest the astronaut's been in space right now is a little over a year. So again, 12-year long round trip, and we've only had someone in space for a little over a year. I don't know if we're willing. No one's willing to take that risk from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's good that you bring that point out, Brandon, because the romantic idea, the romantic notion that we have about space travel, we get from the media that we have now, and that's either television or movies, or science fiction stories and things of that sort. And for the most part, a lot of that stuff that depicts space travel as something that happens almost instantaneously. It doesn't take very much time to travel from one side of the galaxy to the other side of the galaxy. And of course, if you think about it, if you're in a television format of where you have a 1-hour program of which only 48 minutes is the content and the rest is commercials, well, you have to have a lot of stuff happen. In order for a lot of stuff to happen in that 48 minutes, you have to collapse the time. And so, one way to make that happen is if your trip across space has some kind of propulsion system that allows that travel to happen almost instantaneously, then you can spend more time with the story rather than, doing the travel thing. But as you pointed out, if it's going to take us 6 years to get to Jupiter just to get there, then there's a mission to be carried out once you get there. And if you want to bring folks back, it's another 6 years. That's 12 years of time. And that's not even really including the mission portion of this. And so these become real barriers to the reality of space exploration for humans, because a lot can happen to a human in 12 years, especially out in space. So these propulsion systems are part of the reality, or becoming part of the reality of how space exploration will change in the future. And I think the cool thing is that you're right there, on the front line, working on ways to make future space travel much more realistic.
Yeah, I think a good takeaway, definitely when it comes to like going to a place like Jupiter, it's not that it's impossible. I think we will figure it out. I really, really believe we will. And it's going to be those advanced propulsion systems that's going to help us figure that out. But I also am a firm believer, and this isn't my expertise, that we must also take in consideration the different technological jumps on the medical side of things, because I think by pairing those two, we'll come up with a solution that is more plausible for us to actually make it to these far away places. So if our medical technology gets more advanced to where we can help mitigate some of the medical issues we're seeing, like bone density loss and things like that, if we have some of those things coupled with technology, I think we'll have a much better concept to actually make some of these missions happen.
So Brandon, let's put two things together here. Your interest in overcoming some of the medical challenges of space flight and your work at overcoming some of the challenges of future propulsion systems. What is it you would like to see humans doing in terms of future space exploration? Do you have a fantasy or a dream in mind of like the ultimate thing that humans could do in space exploration?
Yeah, I think I think colonizing the solar system is probably my biggest dream. I think once you go past solar system, it gets really, really tough. Again, the nearest star is super far away. I mean, it would take us so long to get there, even with super advanced propulsion systems. It may be generations before you get there. But when it comes to our solar system, I think it'll be really cool to have a solar system where humans inhabit different corners and areas of it, and I think too, when we leave this time and we go somewhere, that we try our best to have symbiotic relationships with wherever we go. Where we're not just parasites, just taking and taking and taking, that we're actually being mindful of that and thinking of ways of restoring these beautiful environments back to the way they were when we arrived, and trying our hardest to do that. But again, there are a lot of resources out in space, and I think as our population grows, I think as this is a little off subject, I think when the smaller the world gets from technology, I think it's even more of a factor of it's more important for us to leave and go and spread out. Because, for instance, we had COVID happen, and it was a very tough time for a lot of people, definitely with pandemics. But one of the things that helped spread this virus was the fact that planes exist now, whereas 300, 400 years ago, planes didn't exist. All they had is boats. So the ability for viruses to spread worldwide was much harder then. So as we continue technology from a technological standpoint to make the world smaller, I think it's even more important to go out into space to make sure that we preserve mankind, because again, these different types of threats will continue to come about.
Yeah, so you think that you think that humanity should be a spacefaring humanity?
Yep, that's one of my biggest goals, to make humanity a spacefaring civilization, because I think again, as the world gets smaller, there are more threats that can happen and stuff like that, and you want to make sure that you mitigate that, but being spread out, and at the same time learning more and more about, hey, when you go out to space, it's hard to do it by yourself. See, there's a lot of opportunity for partnership and stuff, because this is so hard. It's such a financial burden. You really need help from a lot of people. So those challenges, I think, is what can pull us together as a people, as we continue to try to survive as humans. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of opportunity there, positive opportunity there for going out into space.
So I'm going to ask you this question that I know everybody else you've known your entire life has asked you the same question, but I got to ask. You know what that is? Would you go?
So yes, I would love to go. Actually, I've since I've been interested in space, I definitely have been interested in going. But currently, with NASA standards, I'm actually slightly too tall to be an astronaut.
Oh, come on! How tall are you?
I'm like 6'4", and I think right now it's 6'2.5" is kind of what they try to say the cutoff is, but I'm pretty sure they might let you slide. But
Mike Massimino, let's just 2 words. Mike Massimino, a big guy, he went.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's wiggle room there, and yeah, I would definitely go. And I know from a fantasy standpoint, and I'm sticking with this. My dream job is to be a captain of my own starship. I used to say to myself, you know what? I should drop that dream because it's not realistic, but no, it gets me up every day. And even if I don't become a captain of my own starship, I'm paving the way for somebody else who's going to have that dream to be a captain of their own starship. So that's my dream, being a captain of my own starship. You got to go to space for that.
Oh my gosh, that is gorgeous. That is fantastic. I had other stuff I was going to ask you, but I am not going to step on that in any way. I'm going to let that be the closing statement to this interview, to you being with us, because I can't think of anything better than that I can imagine for you. And it would be a great thing for me and so many more of us of my generation to see you as a captain of a starship. So we're all pulling for you for that, Brandon. That sounds just fabulous. Brandon, look, this has been fantastic. I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight and tell us all about what you are doing as a rocket scientist and what your aspiration is to become captain of a starship. I'm voting for you for that, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you get that spot there, brother. So you got some support behind you for that.
I appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure I'll need a spot for a chief scientist. I think I might know somebody.
Hey, I know somebody too. That sounds great, Brandon. That sounds great. So look, hey, thanks again. We greatly appreciate it. Good luck to you in your career. And look, I hope you'd be willing to come back and join us here on the program again sometime in the future. We can talk some more about rocket propulsion and what's happening out there with rockets today.
Yeah, anytime, man. I could talk about this stuff all day. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Hey, that sounds great. Okay, Brandon, thanks a lot. Folks, we've had this wonderful opportunity to talk to Brandon Burroughs, who is an engineer who works in the field with rockets real time, gets his hands dirty putting rockets together, testing them to make sure that they can stand the stresses and forces of launch and flight and all that sort of stuff. Has a great dream about becoming a starship captain and is really working on a cutting edge right now to imagine and develop new propulsion technologies that'll carry humans forward into the future of space exploration with new propulsion systems. So we've been really fortunate to have him here tonight. I hope you enjoyed him. Brandon, we'll see you again sometime in the future. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you.
Wow, I don't know what to say about that. Maybe I don't say anything at all. It's fantastic. It's not every day that you get to not only have a real rocket scientist, but someone with a dream like that. Like I said, I know who I want to be when I grow up. So I hope you enjoyed it, folks. So let's check and see if we have any additional questions for our program out there. Linda, what do we have?
Trish would like to know, what does a booster do?
Trish would like to know, what does a booster do? Well, a booster, Trish, is that portion of the rocket that provides the thrust that carries the payload up. So as Brandon was saying earlier, in the Apollo program, you have 363 feet of rocket. The top 15 or 20 feet carries the payload. That's the astronauts and all the supplies they needed to go visit the moon. So 340 feet down below them were all the different booster stages. And these boosters house the fuel and the oxygen, the fuel and the oxidizer, and they hold the rocket motors that actually create the thrust that pushes the rocket up into space. So that's what a booster is. A booster is that portion of the spacecraft that actually pushes the rocket up into space that provides the thrust.
Maria has a joke for you.
Aha, okay. Maria, I understand you have a joke.
How does Saturn clean its rings?
Oh, wait a minute. I haven't heard this one, Maria. How does Saturn clean its rings? I don't know. How did Saturn clean its rings, Mariah?
With a meteor shower.
With a meteor shower. Oh my gosh. That's a good one. I haven't heard that one before. How does Saturn clean its rings? With a meteor shower. All I need is a drum kit to give a rim shot here. That was very good. Thank you very much. I'm going to steal that if you don't mind. Thanks a lot. I love the humor. That's really good. Thanks, Maria.
Samuel said, have you ever heard of a planet by the name of WASP-12?
Oh, who was it again?
Samuel.
Oh, Samuel. Samuel's asking if I've ever heard of a planet named WASP-12. Samuel, in fact, I have heard of a planet named WASP-12. WASP-12 is one of a group of planets orbiting a particular star that has that designation. And believe it or not, actually, Samuel, on my phone, I have an app called Exoplanets. And this app keeps track of all of the exoplanets that have been identified as being real, honest to goodness planets. So it keeps track of the candidate planets that have been identified, and it keeps track of those planets that have definitely been identified. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a quick search and see if I can find some of these planets that you are identifying as WASP. And you know what? I wish I could really show you this, but I'll get it up to the camera as close as I can. It's not going to be quite, there we are. Now you can see there's WASP 187b, and there's a whole list of these exoplanets with that designation, Samuel. So yeah, WASP 12, that's a really cool one. I'm glad to hear you know about that. There are about 4,000 other ones out there, not with that designation, but exoplanets like that one. Thanks a lot, Samuel. That was a great question. Love that one.
We have lots and lots of shout outs to Brandon.
Oh, Brandon, you're getting lots of shout outs here. So glad you could be here for our program. A lot of people enjoyed your presence with us tonight. So that's great. Glad you could have been with us.
Come back.
And Brandon, they'd love you to come back. So we're going to have to invite you back.
I'd love to be back.
Okay, so Mike would like to know.
Thanks, Brandon.
No, William says, how close are we to astronaut hibernation?
Is that William?
That's William.
William wants to know, how close are we to astronaut hibernation? You mean like some sort of suspended animation sort of thing like we see in the movies and the television programs where you put the astronauts to sleep and they sleep for years and years and years while the spacecraft is going on to another location? You know, there are animals that can do that, but we haven't been able to get to that in humans yet. So it's a great idea, but until we can figure out how the animals do it, I don't think we're going to be doing it with humans anytime soon. So I think the next possibility for long duration space travel is something called the generation spaceship, in which you have generations of space travelers that live aboard a spacecraft as it goes across these incredibly long distances of space from our solar system to other solar systems. That's a really good question, though. Thanks, William.
Just a general question. Do missions have plans for space junk that is left when they go into space?
Oh, a general question. Do missions have plans for space junk when they go in space? Yeah, there are some plans for that. In terms of, if we're talking about something like Space Shuttle, for example, the Space Shuttle program brought all of its trash back to Earth. There were some liquids that they did expel into space, and we'll be discreet about what those liquids were that were expelled into space, but the trash was brought back. And in fact, trash from International Space Station, that gets brought back in spacecraft that burn up on reentry in Earth's atmosphere. So that trash is incinerated, if you will. But, you know, in terms of space junk, in terms of equipment and such like that, there hasn't been very much of a plan, but NASA and other space agencies are beginning to develop plans for how they can carefully and responsibly deorbit space junk so that it isn't cluttering up low Earth orbit. So there's still a lot of work to be done in that regard, but agencies are beginning to look at this because they realize that could become a problem in the not too distant future. What else do we have?
Mike would like to know, is there a difference between the current rocket going to the moon compared to the Saturn rockets?
Oh, Mike wants to know if there are differences between the current rockets that are going to the moon and the Apollo rockets that went to the moon 50 years ago. Well, basically no. These are still chemical rockets that use a liquid fuel and an oxidizer to create thrust. The rocket motors are more powerful now and more efficient now, but they still basically work the same way. So, you know, if you want to lift a little bit of payload, you need a lot of thrust to get out of the Earth's gravity well, if you will, to break the bonds of Earth's gravity to carry that payload up to the moon. So, you know, the more payload we carry, the more fuel and oxidizer we need, the bigger the rocket has to be. So there are all kinds of issues like that. Brandon spoke a little bit about that. I hope when we have him back, we can dig into that a little bit more and expose a little bit more about that and talk about different ways in which we might be able to explore the solar system by maybe building what we need out in space. Thanks, that was a good one.
Someone said that Earth was egg-shaped, but Mike responded with it's an oblate spheroid.
Oh, yes. Someone says that the Earth is egg-shaped, and Mike, you're saying it's what's called an oblate spheroid. Yeah, it is. It's odd. It's oddly shaped. It's not far from spherical, not far at all. But we know, because we can measure very carefully from space, what the shape of the Earth really is, and it's this oblate spheroid thing. So I'm going to say it's not exactly oval, not quite potato shaped, nothing, but it's got some dents in it in places that make it not exactly round, not exactly spherical, but very, very slightly off. So close, though, that it'd be hard for you to actually notice. that shape difference. Okay, so we got a couple of other things we have to do here, folks. Thanks very much for those questions. We really appreciate it. We'll see if we can squeeze one or two more in. But guess what we have to do? We have to go over and take a quick look at the night sky. So let me just clean up a few things here, and we're gonna share my screen here and just jump out into space just a second. As I said, I'm gonna clean up a few things here right quick. Just give me this. Okay. And here we go. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here, folks. Great. We're going to go over to my desktop here. I think I have the right one. Yep, there we go. And we're going to use my favorite star map for this program, Stellarium-web.org. This is the online version of the home planetarium system called Stellarium. I'm going to get rid of the menu bar over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And folks, if you can see my screen now, we're looking right at the night sky. And great, my studio producer tells me that she can see the screen here. Thank you very much. We're going to make it just a little bit larger. So folks, as you're looking at this now, you can see there's the letter N that indicates the direction north. I'm going to use my cursor and my mouse pad to just pull things around here so that we're looking out towards the south at this time of evening. There we go. Now you see a lot of stars out there and they look really great. If the sky is clear, this is what the sky would look like, someplace where the sky is clear and dark. You can see that there are a lot of bright stars. The winter sky has more bright stars than the summer sky does. Of course, the difference is temperatures are warmer in the summer, a little crisp and cool out tonight, so it might be challenging to be out for a while. But there's some really great rewards out there in the evening sky because the winter circle is available to be seen. I'm going to bring up some constellation outlines so you can see what these constellations are. I have them all over the sky now, but I'm going to point out the winter circle to you. We're going to start right over here. Hopefully you can see my cursor, and I am encircling a particular constellation called Orion the Hunter. I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. There we go. We're a little bit too close. There we are. So here's Orion the Hunter. Orion is made up of 7 bright stars that are easy to see. There are 2 that make up his shoulders. Here's the left shoulder behind the letter O. There's the right shoulder there. We're going to come down here to his right knee and over here to his left ankle right here. And there are 3 stars that go right across his waist here. And these stars are known as the belt of Orion. So we have shoulder stars, the waist, the ankle, and the knee stars right here. And these stars are quite familiar to you. It's Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse is the one right here at the top shoulder. It's a red giant star and easy to see in the evening sky. Bellatrix is this one right over here at his left shoulder. We'll come down here to Rigel at his left ankle. And over here at his right knee is a star called Saiph. So it's Betelgeuse, Bellatrix, Rigel, and Saiph. And the stars across his waist here are Mo, Larry, and Curly? No, Tom, Dick, and Harry. They are, it's going to come to me in just a second. Let's just call them 3 belt stars right now, and the name will come to me in just a second. But what I really want you to see here from these 3 belt stars, Mintaka, Alnilam, and Alnitak, right across the 3 right there. Right down here is this fuzzy patch of light that is called Orion's sword. But that fuzzy patch of light is the location of a nebula where stars are currently being born. This is Orion, the Orion Nebula right there. And you can see that easily in a clear, dark sky. Shows up better with a pair of binoculars. And this is a location where you can easily see this location where stars are currently being born right there. You can't see the stars being born because they're buried in the clouds and gas, but that's where that is. Well, Orion is the anchor of this winter circle of stars. Let's come up here to Taurus, where we have a bright star called Aldebaran. This is the red star, the red giant star in Taurus right here, connected to this small patch of stars called the Pleiades. So there's Taurus, part of the winter circle. We come around toward the top here, we come to Gemini, where we have Pollux and Castor. These 2 bright stars mark the heads of the Gemini twins. These stars are almost equal in brightness. They're easy to recognize, and the rest of the stars of the bodies of the twins are also easy to see. So we have the heads right here, and then their feet right down here, their bodies in between the heads and the feet. You can see those easily without too much difficulty. Let's come a little bit further around, and we'll see two stars right here. These two stars make up a constellation called Canis Minor. Canis Minor, the little dog. The little dog is Canis Minor right here. And the bright star here is called Procyon. Procyon is that bright star there at Canis Minor. We'll come past Monoceros down to Canis Major. Canis Major's bright star is called Sirius. Sirius is the brightest star in the northern hemisphere sky. Part of the reason why it's so bright is because it's not so far away from us. It's only 8 light years away. That means the light we see tonight left that star 8 years ago. These are the two hunting dogs of Orion the Hunter. So in mythology, Orion is a great hunter. He has two hunting dogs, Canis Minor and Canis Major. Orion himself, with his outstretched arm holding a shield here and a club over his head right here, is facing Taurus the bull. Taurus faces Orion, and it looks as if they're going to have a fight, but they'll never get any closer to each other than they are right here. A really cool thing about Taurus is that Taurus is one of the oldest constellations known. This group of stars was identified as the constellation we now know as Taurus more than 6,000 years ago. So this is a really, really old constellation, or a constellation that was known a very, very long time ago. Let's bring the sky around a little bit more toward the southeast, where we're going to find Leo the lion. Here's Leo right here, and Leo is the main constellation of the spring sky. So pretty soon, Leo and his attendant constellations of Cancer, Ursa Major up above the Big Dipper, you can see almost at the top of the sky here, right there, along with Virgo, Hydra right here, and Crater. These constellations will become the primary constellations of the spring sky. So right now, this star map is set for 8:56 p.m., almost 9 p.m. So if you go outside right now and look at the sky, if the sky is clear where you are, you'll see the bright constellations of the winter sky, and you'll see the bright constellations of the spring sky, both in the sky together. And over the next weeks, what will happen is the sky background will change, the winter constellations will march further to the west, and the spring constellations will come in to take up that portion of the sky. Now, I did say that there were bright planets that are visible in the pre-dawn sky. I'm going to bring us around to southwest sky, and I'm going to adjust our time. I'm using the device down in the lower right-hand corner, and I'm going to advance the time hour by hour. You can see it's almost 3 o'clock in the morning. Here it is 4 o'clock in the morning, now almost 5 o'clock. I'm going to bring the minutes right up to about there, and take a look. You can see, let's just close that box right there. Here are the bright planets Venus and Mars over in the southeastern portion of the sky at 5 a.m. So at 5 a.m., you can see them there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring the sky a little bit further on over a few minutes. I'm just going to accelerate us here and bring us just before 6 a.m. And the reason why is because down low, you can see there's little Mercury down close to the horizon. And as we get closer to 6 p.m., Saturn is also lurking down there. But what's the best time for us to catch Saturn? Well, I'm going to advance the days first of all, and I'm going to bring us up to the 25th of the month. And I'm going to take our time back also a little bit here in my last few minutes. And here I have right down on the horizon now, Venus is the large one, Mars is right next door, and this one, making a triangle in the sky on the 25th of this month at 5:30 in the morning, is Saturn. So if we put these, if we get out to the 25th and the 26th of this month at 5:30 in the morning, we'll find Venus, Mars, and Saturn all together very close and low in the southeastern sky. 2 days later, the moon comes in to join them. And if we let time pass up until just before 6 o'clock, we have the 3 planets and a very thin crescent moon left in the sky right there. So folks, this star map that I'm using, stellarium-web.org, will certainly be very helpful to you if you'd like to use a star map like this to figure out what constellations are available to be seen in the sky. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now as we're getting close to time. But this is a great star map you can use. You can find it online, or you can actually download the app itself, Stellarium, and have it on your computer. And there are also plenty of star map apps that you can use on your smartphone that work just as well too. We've had a great time here this evening, folks. I was supposed to mention a little bit earlier that James Webb Space Telescope is on location. Right now, what's happening is that the scientists and engineers are aligning the mirrors of the telescope, that they produce a really good image. That testing is going to go on for the next several months. We'll see the first science images in the late spring, but it's doing very well out there. Everything is just fine with James Webb Space Telescope, and we can look forward to what James Webb is going to bring up for us to see coming up in the not too distant future. Don't forget, first day of spring, March 20th at 11:33 in the morning. And if you're interested in catching more information about astronomy, if you need to get your space fix on between these programs at the first of the month, don't forget, you can check out our new Astro series, A Practical Guide to the Cosmos. You'll find that at beyond.fi.edu. The episodes drop every Monday. It's me and my partner, Kalpana Pot, from the Griffith Observatory, and she's actually a really significant TikTok influencer. We get together and talk about our favorite things about astronomy and space exploration in this series, A Practical Guide to the Cosmos. At beyond.fi.edu, as I said, the episodes drop every Monday, so we just had an episode a few days ago. Next one is coming up in a couple of days. Go check it out. You'll be able to learn everything you want to know about the universe and about space. It's a really great program. The Franklin Institute has fully reopened. We're now open daily from 9:30 a.m. until 5. Harry Potter is open until into the evening. The last entry is at 6:30 p.m. You can get tickets for that online. So if you want to check out Harry Potter, the Harry Potter experience, let me get my words straight. It's a fabulous exhibit. You'll love it. But I have to warn you, guess what? Tickets for this weekend are already sold out. In fact, we sold over 145,000 advance tickets, but you can still come see the program. The best time to see that exhibit is during the week, weekdays between 12 and 4. Weekdays between 12 and 4, you can get there without a lot of crowds and you can still get in to see Harry Potter. But you really need to get your tickets online because so many have been sold in advance. You want to get your tickets online so you can have the best opportunity to get a date and time of your choice to see Harry Potter, the exhibition. This is a world premiere exhibit at the Franklin Institute now. One thing I can certainly mention about Franklin Institute is that the latest city health department guidelines have removed all of the indoor mask mandates, so visitors are no longer required to wear masks in the building. Again, we're back open to our usual times daily from 9:30 until 5. Come visit us so you can see all of our iconic exhibits and our science experiences that are available for your engagement. So we look forward to seeing you at the Franklin Institute soon, and we'll see you next month for this program, Night Skies at Home. Thanks for joining us. I'm Derrick Pitts, your cool astronomer, chief astronomer at the Franklin Institute. Don't forget my motto: eat, breathe, do science, and sleep later. So long, folks. Enjoy the rest of the month. Get outside and look at the night sky. Take care. We'll see you next month. There was a joke? Sure.